Quizlet has over 200 employees across 3 offices in San Francisco, Denver, and London.
Being at the Denver Quizlet office for the last year has been pretty incredible. Seeing the office grow while maintaining its, core connections to our values. It's been an incredible experience to be a part of, seeing how humble, candid, and open everyone has been, and being part of a mission-driven company in a time of uncertainty has been incredibly rewarding. So I look forward to, what the future brings, because the last year has been a wonderful experience. Thank you, Quizlet.
Hey everyone, my name's Adam Bauman and I'm part of the Quizlet team here in Denver. I'm proud to work for a company whose goal is to help every single person on this earth become a better lifelong learner. One of my favorite things about working at Quizlet is how much we follow our company values. There's always learning opportunities. We encourage everybody to teach themselves something new, as well as help each other learn. Whether it's from art classes or lunch and learn talks on latest technologies, there's always something new to find and help yourself grow. And I really feel like that's one of the best things that any company can offer is growth and opportunity.
Thank you to our sponsors for their support and helping us to keep DSW free and accessible for all. Special shout out to Quizlet for supporting our developer track and helping make this content happen. With that said, I'm very excited to kick off this video presentation from Dylan Peterson. There's some great content and he's planning to stick around after it plays to do some Q&A. Thanks so much.
Hi, my name is Dylan Peterson. Welcome to the 8th annual Denver Startup Week, the largest entrepreneurial event of its kind. Be sure to share your experience with the session online at #DenStartupWeek. Today, I'm going to talk about one of tech's newest roles, the growth engineer. In this presentation, I'm going to talk about what is a growth engineer, what does growth generally mean, what does growth at Quizlet mean, which is where I work, what do you individually do as a growth engineer, what are important traits for a growth engineer to have, and then I will talk about some examples from real life. First off, what is a growth engineer? Put really simply, a growth engineer is someone who builds things to move metrics. By building things, that is engineering part, moving metrics is the growth part. The number one priority of a growth engineer is to improve metrics that help grow the company. The metrics that you improve depend on the company, and how you grow depends on the company as well. So what do I mean by grow? Well, put really simply, there are 3 steps, and the first one is to use a house metaphor. It's to bring more people through the door, keep them in the room, and then exchange money for value. And this relates to industry terms like bringing more people through the door is acquisition, keeping them in the room is related to activation, engagement, retention, and exchanging money for value is revenue. So now that we've seen the broad ways that companies grow, which is through bringing people in, keeping them in the room, and exchanging money for value, Quizlet does all of these things. We have teams focused, working on initiatives in all of these areas. We don't exactly call them that, and some of the responsibilities are split between teams, but we do acquisition, we do activation, engagement, retention, and our revenue activity is the primary ways that we make revenue is through subscriptions, through a monthly or annual paid subscription or advertising. So within Quizlet, acquisition, these are some examples of activities we do within all of these growth activities. In terms of acquisition, we rely heavily on SEO. We have built a referral program. Activation activities might include sign-up optimization, so trying to get people to sign up or log in when they're using the site from a logged out state, as well as user onboarding, which is basically how do you show a new user the value of the platform. Engagement, an example of that is building notifications. So sending the right message to the user at the right time to help them use the app more aligned with their needs. Subscriptions, conversion optimization. So maybe within the product, finding ways to unlock value by pointing them out to features that are useful for them at that time, as well as cross-selling and upselling opportunities. And then ads activities might include optimizing where you show ads and the frequency with which you show them. Now, so those are the activities that Quizlet does as a whole. Now I want to talk about what you might do individually. The biggest thing that you want to do, or that you do, is you learn, and you learn through experimentation. We rely heavily on experimentation. And the reason that we rely so heavily on experimentation is that we don't know what works. We have a lot of ideas, we have a lot of hypotheses, and we want to create a small way to test the hypothesis. We want to do a lot of them to figure out what works. And then once we uncover the things that work, that's when we want to fully build it out. So if the goal is to experiment and to learn through experimentation, then we need to have engineers that have certain traits that are aligned with this goal of learning through experimentation. And so now I want to talk about important traits to have as a growth engineer. This is not an exhaustive list. There are definitely a lot of traits to have, but these particularly are super helpful for accomplishing the specific goal of high growth experimentation. And those are hacky, speedy, creative or idea generating, and data focused. So what I mean by hacky is you have an idea of doing something, or you have a design, or you have a hypothesis of something you want to test out. Your job as a growth engineer is to say, okay, now obviously you might get a design from product or design that is like really awesome and beautiful and fleshed out, or there's an idea that is a pretty extensive flow and it might take a couple weeks to build. The hacky way, and your job as a growth engineer, is to say, is there a way to test this hypothesis by maybe reusing other work that's already been completed within the company? Like, did somebody create a modal that somebody else used before, or a certain component that is close that helps you test this hypothesis but doesn't require a completely new build? So that's what I mean by hacky. Speedy. So another thing you want a growth engineer to do is be constantly asking the question, can we cut scope, or can we cut complexity to release sooner? Because the sooner you get something out, the sooner you understand if something works or not. So you don't want to be in a situation where you build something for weeks and weeks and then you release it and it doesn't perform. You might have thought it was going to perform really well, but it didn't. And then you have the learning from that, but you've spent weeks building something that maybe you could have tested in a hackier, speedier way to then iterate on that success in the future. Creative and idea generating. Questions to ask yourself, what are all the different ways that we can test something? I think you can test a hypothesis in different ways. So what are all of those ways? And then what would be a novel approach to this problem? And then by data focused, questions to ask yourself, where are there drop-offs or inconsistencies in user behavior that you're seeing through data? So is from one part of a funnel to another, are you seeing a particularly large drop-off? Are there a large percentage of users not reaching a certain flow or not experiencing a certain feature? Things like that to understand and find opportunities within the product. Now I want to talk about a real life example that we recently worked on at Quizlet. And this was through our referral program. So put really basically, a referral program is when one user brings in more users and in return for bringing in another user receives a reward or a referral bonus of some kind, some sort of incentive. The question that we wanted to answer and ask ourselves is, is this a viable growth channel? Can we reliably grow and scalably grow through referrals? Now, to answer this question, a question that we also need to answer is, can we get enough users in the program? What is the potential scale of this? Now, as a growth engineer, this is where you want to use or exhibit those traits that I talked about of being hacky, speedy, creative, and data focused. So here's how you might be hacky. You want to build a lightweight prototype. So how can we get this referral program or a version or a smaller version of the referral program out in the market as quickly as possible? And for us, what hacky meant is we wanted to put something out there within our product that tested if there was interest for it so that we could get data back to understand, without building the entire flow, can we get people to interact with something that might express interest as a proxy for building out the whole program? And from there, we extrapolate whether the numbers make sense to fully build out. Speedy. So we want to get these numbers as quickly as possible. So we started with the first version of gathering interest within our product by releasing this within a week. And then you might be data focused by gathering stats to determine if there is enough user interest to support building out this full, like larger, fully fledged referral program. So keep in mind, when I'm saying, can we get enough users in the program? We're asking ourselves, before building, can we get enough of a signal to determine whether it makes sense to build? Because building this might take a couple months, and it did end up taking a couple months, but can we do initial upfront work in a couple weeks to see, is that effort worth it? And so basically, by being hacky and speedy and data focused, we were able to get something really small out that gave us a pretty strong signal that there are enough users out there that have interest in this and are willing to share, that we can grow through this. And so basically, after we answered this question, we fully built out the program, which right now is available on Quizlet.com/refer-a-friend. And here are some screenshots of that fully formed program that we did. That it has 2 user-facing screens, and then we actually ended up expanding it from an initial user base to a larger user base. So we started with students here. So you could go within the platform and find your referral code. And then this is what you would see if you were invited by your friend. The next example I want to talk about is a little different from the previous example. This is about optimizing a specific metric. And that metric is sign up and login optimization. Whereas the previous example was about building something that we kind of know what we want to build. We're just unclear if the numbers justify putting in the effort. Whereas here, we have this base rate, this base metric of sign up rate, login rate, and we're trying to improve it. So now let's look at basically what kind of traits of being a growth engineer can we look at to help us solve this problem. And the problem is basically, how can we increase the rate at which users sign up and log in? And one of those things in our toolkit is being data focused. So looking at the data and questions you might ask yourself in order to increase this rate is, where within the product are people currently signing up? So we have sign up buttons basically all over the page. We have them on marketing pages. We have them in the product in various places. We have them in the header. And so we want to see, where is the largest percentage of people signing up? And can that knowledge help us? Maybe would we want to focus our efforts there, for instance? So say sign up is happening for the largest part in one area, it doesn't really make sense to try to optimize an area of the product where not that many people sign up, because even if we were to improve that, it's not really going to affect the metric that much. Another question we might want to ask is, does sign up behavior differ according to direct traffic versus organic traffic? So if someone's heard about Quizlet, they're going to Quizlet.com. That behavior is a little different than someone coming in through Google, for instance, because they're going to land on a different part of the product. And so we might want to think about if someone's coming in through Google, they probably have a certain intent and wondering if we can put sign up walls maybe in places where they have higher intent. Another question we want to ask is maybe what is the most effective method of signing up? So right now on Quizlet, you can sign up with just your email address. You can sign up through Google. You can sign up through Facebook. At the time of doing this work, we didn't have Apple Auth, but now we do. And so we might want to look at where are most people signing up? Is it through email? Is it through Google? Is it through Facebook? Do we want to emphasize one of these and de-emphasize another? Can that help us? And then another question you might want to ask is, what is the drop-off rate from seeing a sign-up wall to actually signing up? So say there's a lot of people that look at this form, but the actual percentage of actually signing up is pretty low. So there we might want to do some testing around the different form fields and maybe the design and the experience. Another helpful skill to help answer this question is idea generating. And so we looked at what other companies were doing with sign up and login and see how aggressive they did it or how unaggressive they did it. Is it within a certain part of the product? Are they just doing Google? Are they just doing Facebook and that sort of thing? And then brainstorms. So that's a simple one. Basically presenting this problem to the team internally and encouraging everyone to contribute ideas to increase the sign up rate. The next example I want to talk about is new user onboarding. And so what I mean by that is a new user signs up on Quizlet. What is their experience? How can we show them the value of Quizlet so that they become a lifelong user? Now, this example is different from the other two with the referral program, where we wanted to see, is it worth building this program? The sign up and login optimization, that was about optimizing a metric. So what do we need to do to increase the metric? This example, we're creating something entirely new from nothing. So we don't have an onboarding experience. Really, there's so many things that we can do with this. And so this is really where a lot of the ideas and creativity skills come into play. So the question is really, how do we introduce the product most effectively to new users? An important skill in our growth engineer toolkit is being data focused. So we can look at what actions do existing users take. So of all the people that are currently using the site and have used Quizlet, what do they do that then is important to lead them to retention? And that's really where the data analyst comes in. But it's important to understand these metrics and to be able to kind of look up some of these things on your own. The next thing is idea generation. So when you are starting from a blank slate of new user onboarding where you don't have a current experience and you need to find a new one, where do you get the ideas from? So two main sources that we used competitive analyses. So we looked at what other sites were doing for new user onboarding, and then we held our own internal brainstorms to figure out and get ideas to test, basically. For this project, it was super important to be hacky. Since we don't know what we want to build and we don't know what works, we have to try as many things as possible, which means we can't spend months building something. We got to try a bunch of small different experiments to see, okay, this thing does work. Okay, let's incorporate that. This thing doesn't work. Okay, let's not use that. So we didn't want to reinvent the wheel in terms of like creating these really time-intensive designs and spending a lot of engineering resources on building out a fully fledged program from the beginning. We want to start really small and really hacky. And we want to reuse existing stuff to see, okay, does this work? Can we get this out really quickly? If it does work, let's include it in the larger flow. And so that was super helpful here. So to recap our three examples, for the referral program, speed was super helpful here. We wanted to get an initial signal out in the market to see if there's interest in this program. With our sign up and login optimization work, where we're optimizing a specific known metric, we wanted to be data focused to try to lead us to the opportunities that existed to improve this metric. And then for new user onboarding, we really needed to be hacky here. We wanted to see what works. We wanted to get it out. We wanted to build lightweight, and reuse if possible, because we couldn't afford to build something for months that took up a lot of resources and then ultimately didn't end up working. We wanted to work really small, be hacky, lightweight, see what works, and then iterate on that. And with that, I wanted to thank you for listening, and I hope this was helpful to learn more about growth engineering. If you have any questions, you can contact me on LinkedIn, or you can tweet at me using the hashtag Denver Startup Week. And I wanted to thank my title sponsors, the track sponsors, Quizlet, my employer, for sponsoring the developer track, headline sponsors, partner sponsors, and I wanted to end by saying, at Denver Startup Week, we strive to make all of our sessions a space where attendees can connect, learn, and grow, regardless of gender identity, gender expression, race, ability, sexual orientation, and the combination of those identities. As you leave today and throughout the week, introduce yourself to someone who doesn't look like you or who may identify differently than you. Thank you. Awesome. So now looking through the chat, we're going to do a couple minutes of Q&A. So I see the first question is, how common of a term is growth engineer? I would say this is a pretty common term within the industry. Definitely, I think it skews a little bit more established company. I think it would be a little surprising to have growth engineers at super small startups, because I think their focus is more on finding product market fit rather than growing. I've also seen some companies call growth engineers people who are not necessarily doing software engineering, but more they're like looking at acquisition channels like marketing and advertising and that sort of thing. So I guess a common way to call people growth engineers is you specify the team, so like growth, and then the role. So role being software engineer, product designer, data analyst, marketer, etc. And then the next question, also I encourage, if you have a question, feel free to throw this in the chat. The next question that I'm seeing is, what are professions that are drawn to this type of work? Marketing, sales, engineers. I would say anyone can be interested in growth. I think if you're interested in moving business metrics, it doesn't necessarily matter which role you're in. I think you can have a huge impact, whether you're a designer, whether you're in marketing, whether you're in sales, engineering. I'd say sales maybe less so, but I guess if you're open to recreating maybe a sales pipeline and finding different ways to have a sales program. For instance, there's this one company that I spoke to that created a fully automated inbound sales program just through technology. So they were able to basically like automate salespeople, which is really cool. And so obviously they need salespeople to help with that. So yeah, I think generally any role, I think on a growth team is super helpful. It's really helpful to have the mindset. The next question, what do you like most about being a growth engineer? I think the really cool thing is, there's two things for me. The first thing is the impact. Since our goal is to impact a metric, everything you do is centered around improving that metric, and it's super inspiring and motivating to do that, to work with so many people to finally move something. And usually our metrics, I mean, at least on the team that I'm on right now, are around getting new users. So like our mission at Quizlet is to help everyone everywhere learn. So we are basically trying to optimize this metric of finding more people to learn things. So know that like we're not just optimizing a business metric, like it's the business metric is also aligned to doing good. And so that part is really cool. Another cool thing, this is just like a random tweet that I saw one time, is that they're curious why the growth process is not, why the tools that we use are not more like a game. And sometimes it can feel like a game, like doing different things within the product to move metrics up and down. So that part is really cool as well, to do like quick little experiments to see like, can we move this metric up, or will this impact something negatively, and to ultimately succeed. It feels like you're kind of like moving different levels in a game. Cool, so that looks like all the questions I see in the chat. Did anyone have any other questions? Awesome. Well, it looks like we are right on time, at the 30-minute mark. So everyone, I appreciate you coming. If you have any questions, feel free to look me up on LinkedIn, or email me at my Quizlet email, dylan.peterson@quizlet.com.